Thank you. Thanks for coming. I appreciate seeing so many people here. A few of you I know, most of you I don't know, and that's great. As I was looking over the list of organizations that were here, I saw a whole bunch that I am not familiar with, and that's also awesome. I'd love to see a wide variety of people here. I'm going to be, I'm Joel. These are my contact details. This is where I work, as Kedron mentioned. That out of the way, let's talk about responsive design. Before I get into that, how many of you would say that you are primarily developer, write code type people? Excellent. I included a minimal amount of code, assuming that there would not be a lot of coders here. That's great. All right, responsive design. Who has heard of responsive design? A few of you. Excellent. All right. Let's talk about how we designed websites. Start with a Photoshop document, right? We would set the site at 960 pixels wide, slice it into HTML, throw some content in, put it on the web, call it good, right? Then your CEO or you or your kid or somebody would say, hey, I've got this phone, pull up your website. You say, oh yeah, mobile. In previous days, this was a BlackBerry, it's iPhone, Android, whatever. What do we do about mobile? Well, New York Times had this issue, right? This is actually, this is great because this is what Apple was showing off when they started the iPhone and said, hey, we've got all these sites, they work great on these phones, and they do. You can pinch and zoom and stuff. But they said, hey, we need to do something about mobile. This doesn't always work for every site. That's the MLB site. One page on the MLB site, this may well be fixed now, but this actually happened. This is an interesting, do I have a laser pointer on here? Interesting website that collects a lot of interesting examples. I tried not to rely too heavily on it for this. So what do we do about mobile? We make a mobile website, right? We have a desktop site, so we make a mobile website. Make it smaller. If we detect the browser, if it looks like a mobile browser, we redirect to it, or maybe we put a link at the top there, switch to the mobile version, if it's a mobile browser or whatever, and we're good, right? And that actually works really well. This is actually what it looks like when you first go to the New York Times. I closed that out to get a good screenshot, but they have a nice mobile version. It's much cleaner. It's much more usable. So what's the problem? Well, one of them is that everybody has a phone in their pocket. Everybody has Facebook, or somebody has Google+. Anybody? It's been kind of empty lately, but some people do, right? And you see something maybe on your phone and you want to share it. So you say, oh, I like Stephen King. I want to learn about his family. I see this. I click my little button, right? I want to get a link or mail it or something. And then I send it off to somebody. They pull it up in their nice big desktop browser. And it's the mobile site. So they get the mobile link, so they get the mobile site, right? Now, if you want to get the desktop site, you got to scroll, and then you get this whole thing. Now, this is actually maybe nicer to read on the desktop, so that's maybe not a bad thing. You don't have all the ads, you don't have the sidebar, you know exactly where your content is, right? But the point is, now you've got this separate site, right? This also means that you have to maintain multiple copies of your website. So somebody's got to maintain the sidebar for the desktop, and if you update the content, you either have to have a CMS that publishes out to both, or if you're doing it manually, you have to make sure that you do that. And that's fine, but what if you don't put the stuff on the website, right? This is Forbes site, a page for a stock, and everything's on here except the actual content, right? The desktop site presumably has it. The mobile site, for whatever reason, didn't. Now, they fixed this too. So, I mean, but this is the situation. Somebody didn't update the mobile site when they updated the desktop site. So you also get situations like this, content not supported on CNBC's site on the mobile version. I'm not sure what this was. This might have been a video, but it might have just, they say it's page you are visiting is not available on mobile. Well, why not, right? And you also, even if you decide like what to serve a mobile site, what about these tablets, right? What about an iPad here? Pizza Hut says that iPad is mobile, and so it gets this site. It's good, it's wide and stuff, but I mean, if I'm on an iPad, is this what I want, or do I want a little more screen, right? So what do we do instead? That's where responsive design comes in. Responsive design is a term coined by a guy named Ethan Marcotte about 3 years ago. It's not an original idea to him, but he collected several existing practices and technologies under one umbrella, and if you've heard of Ajax, that's a similar thing where somebody gave a catchy name to something that people had been doing and it exploded. And the same thing happened here with responsive design. It lets you take one website, style it so that it works on small screens, on tablets, on desktops, and on unexpected places as well. So use the same website. So you put content on your site and it's everywhere. You don't have to maintain a separate site. Unexpected devices and sizes. I was seeing stuff about flexible screens today. Devices that actually flex and twist. Other oddball devices that somebody might use. It works a lot better on those things. There are, of course, challenges. You need to think hard about how stuff will appear on your device and other stuff that we'll see as we go on. So let's take a look. This is the Boston Globe site. This is current as of a little while ago. This is a responsive site. It looks pretty straightforward, but when you pull the same site up on the iPad, you can see that it's narrower. Stuff is compressed. Where there were 3 columns on the desktop, now there's 2, right? If you rotate the site to portrait mode there, or landscape, now it's sort of spread out a little bit. If you're on a phone, it's just 1 column, and you can see some stuff has changed. So this back here on the iPad, you've got your weather up here with some more words, and you've got 3 sections. On the mobile site, the weather is more compact. You've only got 2 buttons here. They've started to take up space here with ads and stuff, so they are getting away from their content. But this is a site that Ethan Marcotte sort of pioneered a commercial responsive design with. He had a whole team of people, and they were working on making the Boston Globe accessible across all devices rather than the New York Times approach of maintaining multiple sites. It doesn't necessarily, and we can also take a look at, this is just a desktop browser, but it's squished narrow. So if you have like a news ticker or something, if you want to use it on their desktop, you just narrow it down. Now you get something that looks kind of like the mobile display. And maybe they didn't intend you to do that, but because they made the site in a way that you can, now you can do that on your own desktop computer. So how does it work? Responsive websites have 2 major components. I'm not going to do a ton of bullet points, but here are some bullet points. We have flexible content, and we have dynamic design. And that sounds buzzwordy, whatever. I'll talk about it. So let's talk about flexible content. What does that mean exactly? I made myself a nice site. It's really one of the best design sites I've ever seen. I'm not tuning my own horn here, but it's a blog that I'm going to maintain for keeping little bits of my favorite books. You know, I can see I like The Wizard of Oz, I like Around the World in 80 Days, and I'll read more books at some point, I promise. Basic blog stuff, header, content, links, right? So I did this the way that we design sites, 960 pixels wide, but now I resize my browser down, and you can see we've got the horizontal scroll bar here, and stuff is starting to get squished, and if I were to do it more, we would be able to see even less. So let's take a look and see why. This is the top part. In my CSS, cascading style sheets. It's the code that actually makes everything go where it is. I said this container needs to be 960 pixels. Here on the content, I said this needs to be exactly 600, and this needs to be 330. And that's what they're always going to be, regardless of how big the page is. What we need to do is add some flexible content. So rather than say, always have this, oh yeah, and so we also look at the iPhone view. It's the same as the New York Times type. It's usable, but you know, it's not great. We could do better. So we recall we've got 960 pixels here. What we want to do is to take the 960 pixels and instead of a specific value, we make that a flexible percentage of the browser window. So let's say 960 pixels is about 90% of an ideal browser window. Rather than saying specifically 960 pixels, we say 90%, and that means however big the browser window is, it'll take 90% of that. Flexible content. We have to do the same for all the other bits. So remember our content here was at 600 pixels. We'll call that 63%. This is where math comes into design. If you notice back here, our sidebar is gone. That's because I said 63%. Well, now the sidebar at 330 pixels can't fit anymore. It needs to be a percentage that matches, that works well with this. So let's call that 35%, and underneath there is our original content. So now we have flexible content. So we get back to our original site. It looks basically the same, right? But if we squeeze down now, you can see that everything resized proportionally to each other. Our sidebar is narrower. This is narrower. We don't have that horizontal scroll bar. I'm skipping over a whole lot of details here. The percentages tend to be a lot more exact in production, so you can maintain exactly your alignment that you need because this isn't design, but you guys do design. And there's some technical bits. I would strongly recommend this book. Actually, this specific book. Does anybody want this specific book? Anybody? Yes? All right. Here you go. There is a specific book that's by Ethan Marcotte. It's called Responsive Design. It sort of outlines everything that he brought under this umbrella, more detailed than this, and he talks about a lot of those details I'm skipping over in the few minutes that I have remaining. Let's take a look at this on a phone. This is a lot nicer on the phone. It's not great. You can see the edge is still cramped. It's not easy-ish to read, and if we scroll down, our image is super wide, right? Images are content too, so we need to figure out how to make this thing flexible. I am going to show you some code now. If you don't like code, bear with me. It's really easy. This is a bit of CSS. This is the magic that we need to go from this thing to that thing. Now it's all shrunk down. What that says is just make sure that images are never wider than their containing container, I guess, right? So set it at 100% max, and it looks tiny, but it's kind of revolutionary in responsive design because now your images grow and shrink along with the rest of your content. So there were two parts. There was flexible content. The second part is dynamic design. I should mention also that image thing is in this specific book discussed. You guys got to be quick. It's slightly more complicated, but not really. So dynamic design, what do I mean by that? We made the site content flexible. It's good, not great. We saw the image is nice here. Here's the next part of code that I'm going to show you. These are called media queries. These are also kind of revolutionary. What they do is let you, in your site's styles, say, here are some styles that should only apply under certain circumstances. And the most common circumstance that we want to do is based on the browser width. So we have this thing, and up here, this is a comment. It just says, put all your styles for everything here. And in this little jail, max width of 700 pixels. So anything that is as wide but not wider as 700 pixels, put some more stuff, and it'll only apply there. So we can redesign dynamically our site only if the screen is 700 pixels wide or narrower. So we can go from something like this, put some stuff in that area, to something like this. It's the same content. We just tweak the style, and it's only based on the screen size here. We move the links up here. We widen the content. We made these little gray gutters a little narrower, and it's a lot easier to read. You scroll down. Now our max width image takes up everything, and it looks pretty good. The desktop is, of course, still unchanged because our browser is wide enough that those rules don't show up. But if we were to scale it down, now it starts to take effect. We've got our toolbar up here and all this. The content is a lot easier to read in the smaller screen. Our line links are a little better for an eye to read, right? This is a very simple example, I realize. Boston Globe website is a bit more complex. So what does it look like to actually do a more complex site? Let's take a look. This is a site that actually Agathon Group built for an organization called Reframe Media. It's an online Christian magazine. They were redesigning from a WordPress sort of stock template, and they wanted to move to something that would let their folks access and administer stuff on mobile, on tablets, and of course on the desktop. They do a whole lot of promotion on Twitter. They can assume that a lot of people are going to be visiting their site from a device that's not a desktop computer, and so they wanted to get it right. So our wonderful designer, Paul, started actually from the small site, from the mobile site, assuming that this was the default that we wanted people to see. It's very tall, but everything's there. This helped us to really prioritize our content. And we'll be talking, I won't be, but we'll be talking about content later. And this is where content gets really important because you have to know exactly what are people going to see in the area of your site that's probably there on a mobile site. Search bar, some copy, the main image, and all the rest of the stuff is important, but not as important. So it helps us to lay the content out. You scroll down, this is the rest of the stuff. We've got, comments in the Twitter feed and stuff like that. That was the starting point for what we wanted to do. We made this is sort of an iPad tablet type view. And this is, you can see we added another column. We moved some stuff around. We moved our categories up to the top. They were previously down below. And then this is the wider view, bigger image, bigger text everywhere. We can get a little fancier with these comments. The important thing that we did here is that we started with mobile first. So we started assuming the small screen is what people were going to get, and then if their browser was capable, we added more layers on to make it a more complex experience. If their browser couldn't handle it, they would get a nice content optimized mobile website. Why did we do that? So some more bullet points for you, very few. This is the number of new mobile devices per day. When we started Think Christian, this was a little while ago now, it was 1.5 million new mobile devices brought online per day. At the end of 2012, it is 3.6 million per day. Go to lukew.com. He has all kinds of stats, all kinds of more data than you could possibly sift through, but it's really good stuff for convincing somebody else who's making the decisions and possibly giving the money that you need to be able to do this, that mobile is important. This is just going up. There are over a billion smartphones worldwide today. It took about 16 years to reach 1 billion. It's going to take about 3 years to reach the 2 billion. So this is crazy, and if I had a graph, it would go something like that, right? I actually just saw this today. Oh yeah, sorry. Right now, 46% of the population has at least one active mobile device. I saw this today, actually. Lenovo is now selling more mobile and tablet devices than they are desktop devices. So they've actually become a mobile-first company, which is kind of crazy. So we started with mobile first, and we did that because we wanted to be sure that if a desktop came in that couldn't handle some of the more complex stuff we were throwing at it, we'd get something usable, and this is what it would look like, more or less, if it couldn't. You know, it's not awesome, but it's certainly usable. It's designed. The image is a little big, but everything is accessible, and we add stuff as browsers get capabilities. They can recognize the stuff that we're adding, and that's when we can do the redesign. You recall with the book website that I did, that I started with a desktop site, and then I put rules in place that said, when it's narrower, add some more styling, and when it's still narrower, add some more styling. With this one, we went the opposite way. We started with, once again, this is the code that we use for the book website. I said max width, but now we can also, of course, say a minimum width. So rather than saying at most 700 pixels, let's say at minimum 1,005 pixels. So everything gets up here, and then anything that's 1,005 or wider, we can start redesigning at that wider breakpoint, per se. And the nice thing is that these are additive. So if I want to then say, and in addition, if you're also wider than 1280 or whatever, or 1200, here's some more stuff. So each new width gets the benefit of all the previous design, and all you have to do is just tweak it slightly to redesign it for that next width. And it turns out when you're doing this, you spend a whole lot of time getting the mobile right, and each new step gets a whole lot easier because you've made all these decisions, not just about the design, but about the content as well. Because when you're talking about the tablet and you're talking about the desktop, you already know what your important content is because it's the stuff that you talked about right at the beginning. So you know how to prioritize that in the design. So the end result is a website that adapts to its browser width. So this is what it looks like in a phone and portrait, switch to landscape, reworks itself, iPad, same deal, reworks itself, desktop, site as well. It looks pretty good on my Kindle. Either way, I have one of the old keyboard Kindles. And that was actually really cool for me to see because I hadn't tested it at all on there. We got to the point where we were getting close to production. I said, I want to see what this looks like on my Kindle. And this is what it looked like. And it was pretty great. I was happy about that. We started late, right? So I've got a little bit of time. Screenshots are great, but there is always kind of a wow factor when you try to actually use this thing. So let's see if I can drag go away this over to there. So here is Stanford Art's website. And let's try very carefully to resize this. As you resize it, you can see the thing dynamically redesigning itself. Once you get to this point, all of a sudden, it becomes a mobile website. Chrome won't go lower than this width, but That's what you get. That's fine. Well, Boston Globe, that's fine. This is another site that we did, and actually this is something that maybe some of you are wondering. This is this started as a desktop website, and we wanted to, so it wasn't designed with responsive in mind. We didn't have the time to start it over and go responsive, but we wanted to make it usable on mobile. There's nothing saying that you can't redesign a site down, and so what we decided here, just for pragmatic concerns, was to assume that it's going to be fixed with at a certain point, but once you get down to here, now you flip over to the mobile view. It's not switching to a mobile website, it's just completely restyling the page to prioritize stuff for smaller screens. We get rid of some of the larger graphics that aren't going to show up on mobile, and you get something that's really quite usable for a small screen. And then, of course, this is the site that we've been talking about here. It just kind of redesigned itself. Stuff flies in and out as you resize it. So, well, here we go. Find my mouse again. So, it's not all like happy times. There are some technical considerations. There's bandwidth to consider. Once you start throwing everything into your site that all browsers might use, you are going to start serving, if you don't do it carefully, you're going to start serving very large images to devices that might not actually have the bandwidth to be able to handle that. That's a problem. Some of those things are talked about in this book right here. I think I saw, sorry, your hand go up, right? Yeah, you. Can you send this back? Sorry. I actually have more. If you want to talk to me afterwards, we can talk, so don't worry. Ethan talks about that a little bit in there. And there's, since then, the book is actually, it's a couple years old, and the way things go, it's actually showing its age a little bit. It's still quite relevant, but there have been some solutions for this kind of thing cropped up, and I'll give some more reading links afterwards. You also have to consider context. What are your people doing when they're using your website on a small screen? Are they walking? You might say, oh, they're trying to find directions to something. But they might also just be watching TV and somebody says something on there and they want to look it up on their phone, which is the handiest device they have if their laptop's across the room. So they might have high bandwidth, and they might not be distracted by doing other stuff. So you don't know, and I don't have easy answers to tell you how to know that. But Google Analytics can help you determine on some of these things, bandwidth and that kind of stuff. I talked about images. Here's a nice link. And Kedron, can we make these slides available to people later so you don't have to try to write all this stuff down? But here's a nice solution to one of the image problems, if that's actually something that you run across. It tries to dynamically swap in the right image at the time for the person viewing your site. Maintenance. You don't have to maintain a separate site, but you still have to make sure your site looks good in the browser widths that you are supporting. So it's not free, but it's a lot better than maintaining that separate site. The future. It's been around for a while, for about 3 years. There have been actual major websites that start to use it. I would say that it is an inevitability. Much like, if you remember, 10 years ago or so, people started dropping tables for design and started doing more semantic HTML. If that means nothing to you, believe me, it was terrible, and then it was good, and nobody wants to look back. This is the same thing. And the more important thing to take away is, if you are trying to decide, well, okay, I've got my desktop site, do I really need a mobile site? Consider that mobile is now, at least for Lenovo, that's what they're selling, more of than desktop. And mobile will outpace desktop very soon. So the question you really need to be asking yourself is, why do I have my desktop site, right? I really need a mobile site because that's my website. So then how can I make desktop user sites a little better, right? Responsive design can help you do that. Here's a few further reading links. I think I'm right out of time. This is some great examples. I pulled a few from there. There's a whole lot more. MediaQuery.es. You can see a whole lot for inspiration beyond just text blog sites, because those are kind of easy. A lot of people are doing really creative things. Alistapart.com, if you're not familiar with it, it's a fantastic resource for essays, not just on design, but on content, strategy, on everything related to building the web. And this is where a lot of these sort of revolutionary ideas came from. This is where responsive design was debuted. I talked about lukew.com a little bit. Luke Wroblewski is fantastic mobile-first advocate, and he has the data to back it up. He's definitely worth reading. And then if your organization's budget can support it, if you have a conference budget, I realize that is not a given for a lot of people, especially in the nonprofit area. But if you do, I strongly, strongly recommend checking out eventapart.com. It is a very wonderful 2-day event that's packed with kind of the best information you're ever going to get on the web outside of this conference. I actually don't think I have time for questions from up here, but I think that's the mingling and setting up time, so feel free to come up and find me. I might have a few more of these books. Thank you very much.